My twin sister stole my identity and took out $65,000 in loans. My father kicked me out without believing me. But when I confronted her in front of the whole family, I forced her to pay every penny and destroyed her perfect life. I'm 26 years old. I work at a clothing store in the city. And honestly, I need to tell this story because what happened to me a few months ago still has me messed up. Like I literally wake up at night thinking about all of this. The thing is that my own twin sister, my identical twin sister, basically destroyed my life and my relationship with my father. And when I say destroyed, I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. I guess I should start from the beginning. When everything was more or less normal, or what I thought was normal. I grew up in a relatively quiet town with my dad William and my twin sister Gabrielle. We're identical. I mean really identical. The kind where not even my dad could tell us apart when we were kids, unless he looked at us head on and paid close attention. Gabrielle was always the more extroverted one of the two. You know, the one who got all the attention, who had more friends, who was always doing something interesting. I was quieter, more of a stay-at-home, reading or watching series type. Nothing special. Our relationship as sisters was good, or so I thought. Like we got along well most of the time, though obviously we had our fights like any pair of sisters. My dad worked a lot. He always did. In construction, I think. And he did what he could to support both of us, after Mom left us, when we were really young, like 4 years old. I don't remember much about her, to be honest. When we turned 23, Gabrielle moved to the city because she got a job at some company. Something about marketing or advertising. It was never very clear to me. I stayed living with Dad because I was saving money and worked part-time at a coffee shop in town. Nothing fancy, but it was enough for my stuff. I'd visit Gabrielle every now and then, like every 2 or 3 months, and I was always impressed by her apartment because it was super nice. Like one of those with a modern kitchen and everything. And she always had new clothes, expensive shoes, went out to fancy restaurants, and posted photos on social media from all these amazing places. I'd ask her how she could afford all that, and she'd say her job paid well and that she'd gotten some bonuses. And I believed her because why wouldn't I believe her? She was my sister. Things started getting weird about 1.5 years ago. Gabrielle came to town less often. She always had excuses, that she was busy, that she had to work, that she had plans with friends. My dad complained that she never called, and I defended Gabrielle, telling him she was building her life, and that was normal. But looking back, I should have seen it coming. I should have noticed the signs because they were there. I was just too busy living my quiet life to pay attention. And then it happened. One Tuesday afternoon, I was still 25 at that point. I came home after my shift at the coffee shop and there was an envelope in the mailbox. I thought it was advertising or some bill for my dad, but no, it had my full name, Madison Foster, written in very formal printed letters. I opened it and it was a court notification, like an official legal document with stamps and everything, saying I had defaulted on payment of a $15,000 loan I'd taken out from a bank in the city like 6 months ago. I stood there in the doorway reading that paper over and over because I literally didn't understand anything. You know what I mean? I had never taken out any loan, never been to that bank, didn't even know where that bank was located. I thought it was a mistake, like someone got confused about the person or something. I ran into the house and showed the paper to my dad. He read it and looked at me with a face I'd never seen on him, like a mix of confusion and concern. And he asked me, "Madison, what is this?" And I told him, "Dad, I don't know. I never took out any loan. It has to be a mistake." He said he was going to call the bank the next day to clear everything up. And I felt calm because, well, it was obviously a mistake and it would get resolved quickly. But nothing got resolved. The next day my dad called the bank, and they told him that there was indeed a loan under the name Madison Foster, with my social security number and everything, and that it was 3 months behind on payments. They told him they had copies of my identification and my signature on the documents. My dad hung up the phone and looked at me like he didn't know me, and asked me, "Madison, are you lying to me? Did you take out that money and not tell me?" And I swear I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, because my own father didn't believe me. But wait, because it got worse. Over the next 2 weeks, more notifications arrived. Turns out I had taken out not one but 5 different loans, from different banks, for amounts ranging from $8,000 to $20,000. In total, it was like $65,000 in debts that I had supposedly incurred. $65,000 that I never saw, that I never touched, that I didn't even know existed. I called each bank, tried to explain to them that there was a mistake. that I hadn't taken out those loans. But they all told me the same thing, that they had my identification, my signature, my documents, that everything was in order according to their records. My dad got colder and colder toward me. He basically stopped talking to me, and when he did, it was to ask me what I'd spent all that money on, what I'd done with my life to end up like this. I swore to him over and over that it hadn't been me, that someone was using my identity, that he had to believe me, but he just shook his head and said he was disappointed in me. The tension in the house was unbearable, like I couldn't even eat without feeling like he was judging me, and he ignored me like I was invisible. And then came the final explosion. Like 3 weeks after the first notification, another letter arrived, but this one was different. It was from a collection agency, saying they were going to proceed legally against me if I didn't pay, immediately. My dad read it and completely exploded. I'd never seen him that furious in my life. He was literally red in the face, and the veins in his neck were showing. He yelled at me that I was a liar, that I'd disappointed him. How could I have done something like this? And I tried to explain, but he didn't want to hear anything. He told me, "You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out of my house. I don't want to see you again until you fix this mess you made." And I just stood there, unable to believe what was happening. I felt like the floor was opening up beneath my feet. I packed what I could into 2 big suitcases, crying the whole time, and my dad didn't even help me. He just stayed in the living room watching TV like I didn't exist. When I was walking out the door, I said, "Dad, please, you have to believe me. I didn't do this." But he didn't even look at me. Just said, "Get out of my house, Madison." I called my friend from town and stayed with her one night. But the next day, I knew I couldn't stay there indefinitely, so I decided to go to the city. I didn't have many options, to be honest. I needed to find a job and a place to live and try to understand what the hell was going on with my life. I moved into a small apartment I shared with 2 roommates I found on the internet, like one of those places where everyone has their own room but you share the kitchen and bathroom. I got a job at a clothing store in a mall, selling shirts and pants and helping customers all day for a salary that barely covered my rent and food. My life had basically fallen apart in a matter of weeks, and I still didn't understand why or how. I kept getting calls from collection agencies, letters threatening lawsuits, and I didn't know what to do because I didn't have money to pay debts I hadn't incurred or to hire a lawyer to help me. It was at the store where I met Amber. She worked there too. She was like 28, I think. Had super striking red hair and a personality that made you feel comfortable immediately. You know, those kinds of people you like from the first moment. One day we were on our break having coffee in the employee lounge, and I was super stressed because I'd gotten another collection call that morning, and Amber asked me what was wrong. I don't know why, but I told her everything. I explained about the loans, about my dad, about how I hadn't done any of that, but nobody believed me. She listened without interrupting me, and when I finished, she thought for a moment and then asked me, "Madison, do you have brothers or sisters?" And I told her, "Yes, I have a twin sister. We're identical, actually." And I literally saw the light bulb go on. Amber said, wait, you have an identical twin sister, and it didn't occur to you that maybe she could be using your identity?" And I just froze because honestly, it hadn't occurred to me. Like, at all. Because who thinks their own sister would do something like that? I told her, "No, Amber. Gabrielle wouldn't do that. We're sisters." But as I was saying it, I started thinking about Gabrielle's luxurious apartment, her expensive clothes, her lifestyle that she supposedly financed with her job, and it started making sense in a horrible and twisted way that I didn't want to accept. Amber convinced me that we should investigate. She told me we had to go to the banks where I'd supposedly taken out the loans and ask directly, see if anyone recognized me or if there were security cameras or something that would give us information. So the next weekend we had off. Amber and I dedicated ourselves to visiting banks. We went to the first one, the one that appeared on the first notification I'd received, and asked to speak with the manager. I explained the situation, that I believed someone had used my identity to take out a loan, and he took us to his office and pulled out the file. When the manager saw the photo of the identification that was in the file, he stared at me and said, "But this is you, Miss Foster." And I said, "Well, yes, it looks like me because it's my twin sister, but it's not me." And he frowned and said that the person who had come to apply for the loan had been there personally, had presented identification with my name and photo, had signed all the documents. He showed us the copies, and I couldn't breathe when I saw the photo on the ID because it was clearly Gabrielle. I mean, I knew her perfectly, and I knew that was her even though anyone else would think it was me. And the signature was almost identical to mine, but there were small differences I could notice, like the way she made the M was a bit more rounded, and the F had an extra flourish. Amber and I looked at each other and she squeezed my arm like giving me support. We asked the manager for copies of everything, of the fake ID, of the documents with the signatures, of everything he had, and he told us we'd have to file a formal identity theft report, but that he could give us copies for our records. We left that bank, and I literally couldn't process what we'd just discovered. I felt a mix of rage and sadness and shock that I couldn't even describe. My own sister, my twin sister, with whom I'd shared everything since we were born, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. We went to the other 4 banks, and it was exactly the same story at all of them. The employees recognized me. They recognized the person who had gone to apply for the loans, and they all had fake IDs with my name and Gabrielle's photo. They all had signatures that were almost but not exactly the same as mine. In total, Gabrielle had taken out 5 loans in my name for a total of $65,000 over a period of 8 months, and she'd used all the money for her lifestyle, for her expensive apartment, her designer clothes, her fancy restaurant outings, her trips that she posted on social media. She'd built her perfect life with my identity and my credit, leaving me with the consequences and the debts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed, awake in my room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about all the times Gabrielle had lied to my face, all the times she'd come to visit us and acted like everything was normal, all the times I'd defended her when my dad complained that she didn't call. How could she have done this to me? How could my own sister, my twin, the person who was supposed to know me better than anyone in the world, steal my identity and destroy my life without feeling any remorse? The next day, Amber helped me look for lawyers who specialized in identity theft cases. We found Christopher Wells, a guy about 50 years old with an office downtown. I made an appointment and went to see him with all the copies of documents we'd gotten from the banks. I showed him everything and explained the complete situation, from the first notifications to the discovery that it was my sister. He listened very attentively, taking notes in a yellow notepad, and when I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Christopher explained to me that technically I was a victim of fraud and identity theft, that I had the right to file criminal charges against Gabrielle and could also sue her civilly for damages. He told me the first thing we had to do was formally report the identity theft to the police and to the 3 major credit agencies. Then we'd have to contact each bank with the police report and begin the process of disputing the debts. He warned me it was going to be a long and complicated process, that it could take months or even years to resolve completely, but that with all the evidence we'd collected, we had a very solid case. He asked me if I was sure I wanted to proceed legally against my sister. He said he understood it was a very difficult family situation, and I told him yes, I was sure, because what she'd done to me wasn't just illegal but an unforgivable betrayal. About 2 months passed in which Christopher helped me with all the legal paperwork. We filed the identity theft report, contacted the banks with the official documentation, started the process of cleaning up my credit that Gabrielle had completely destroyed. I also tried calling Gabrielle like 1,000 times, but she never answered. I sent her text messages that she left unread but never responded. I wrote her emails that I know she read but ignored. It was like she knew I'd discovered everything and was deliberately avoiding me. The rage I felt was incredible. Like I'd wake up in the mornings and the first thing I'd think about was how she'd betrayed me. I'd go to sleep thinking about all the ways she'd ruined my life, my relationship with my father, my credit, my reputation, everything. My dad still wasn't talking to me. I tried calling him several times to explain what I'd discovered, to tell him he was right that someone had taken out those loans, but it wasn't me, but Gabrielle. But he never answered my calls. I sent him messages explaining everything, sent him copies of the documents we had from the banks, but nothing, 0 response. It was like he'd erased me from his life completely, and that hurt as much or more than Gabrielle's betrayal. Because he was my dad, and he was supposed to believe me, supposed to be on my side, but he'd chosen not to. Amber basically became my only friend and support during all that horrible time. She was there when I needed to vent, when I had anxiety attacks, thinking about all the legal and financial mess I was in because of Gabrielle, when I felt completely alone and betrayed by my own family. She'd tell me, Madison, you're going to get through this. You're going to prove you're innocent, and everyone's going to have to accept the truth. And I wanted to believe her, but there were days when I felt like I'd never be able to clear my name or get my life back. And then came the opportunity I was waiting for. It was October, I think, like early October. And my dad organized every year a big family reunion at his house to celebrate my grandmother's birthday. Well, my dad's mom. It was an event that all the extended family always attended. Uncles, cousins, everybody. Amber told me, Madison, this is your opportunity. If Gabrielle's going to be there, you can confront her in front of the whole family and show them the evidence of what she did. Nobody's going to be able to ignore you or avoid you if everyone's there. At first, I wasn't sure because I knew it was going to be super awkward and dramatic, but then I thought it was actually perfect. Gabrielle wouldn't be able to run away or avoid me if we were surrounded by family, and my dad wouldn't be able to ignore me either. I prepared everything meticulously. Christopher helped me organize all the evidence in a folder. We had copies of the fake IDs, the signatures, the loan statements, the formal police report, everything. I practiced 1,000 times what I was going to say, how I was going to present the information, how I was going to stay calm, even though inside I was furious. Amber, I said she'd go with me to give me moral support. And honestly, I don't know if I could have done it without her. And the day of the reunion, we arrived at my dad's house around 2 in the afternoon. The backyard was full of people. There were tables with food, music playing, kids running around everywhere. I saw my dad from a distance, and he saw me, and literally turned around and went the other way, like he didn't even greet me. But then I saw Gabrielle, and I felt like they'd run electricity through my veins. She was standing there by the drinks table, laughing with our cousin Julia, dressed in clothes she'd probably paid for with money from my fraudulent loans, acting like she didn't have a care in the world. I approached her with Amber by my side and said, Gabrielle, we need to talk. And she turned around, and when she saw me, her face literally went pale. She tried to act normal. Said, hi, Madison. How have you been? With a fake smile. But I could see in her eyes that she knew exactly why I was there. I told her, I need you to come with me right now. We're going to talk in front of the whole family about something very important. And she started saying no, that she was busy, that later. But I raised my voice enough that people around started turning and paying attention. I told everyone to please gather because I had something important to show them, something that involved Gabrielle, and that the whole family needed to know. People started coming over, curious. And my dad came too, though he looked annoyed. Gabrielle was standing there frozen, her face getting paler and paler, and I took out the folder with all the evidence. I explained to everyone what had happened, how I'd received notifications of loans I'd never taken out, how my dad had thrown me out of the house, how I'd discovered that someone had used my identity, and then I started passing around copies of the fake IDs. You can imagine the chaos that erupted. My Aunt Margaret shouted, "This is Gabrielle, not Madison." And my Uncle Robert said, "But it has Madison's name on the ID, this doesn't make sense." And I explained to them that's exactly the point. Gabrielle used her photo, but put my name and my information to take out loans that she used to finance her lifestyle. I showed them the fake signatures, the account statements, the police report, everything. The evidence was so overwhelming that nobody could deny it or question it. Gabrielle tried to defend herself, said it was a misunderstanding, that it wasn't what it looked like. But my cousin Julia asked her directly, "Then why is your photo on an ID with Madison's name? Explain that to us, Gabrielle." And she couldn't. She just stood there moving her mouth without words coming out. My dad was looking at all the evidence with an expression I'd never seen on him, like a mix of shock and horror and sadness. And when he looked at me, I saw his eyes were glassy, like he was going to cry. Gabrielle finally exploded. She yelled that I'd always been Dad's favorite. Total lie. That she deserved to have nice things too. That it wasn't fair that I had everything easy while she had to work hard. Another bunch of lies. Because I literally worked since I was 16, and she always had everything handed to her. She was saying pure ridiculous excuses, trying to justify the unjustifiable, and the whole family was standing there listening to her make the biggest fool of herself. And then she said something that completely broke me. She said, "Besides, nobody was going to notice the difference. We're identical anyway." And in that moment, I understood that to her, I wasn't a real person with my own identity, just a copy of her that she could use for her benefit. Before she could say anything else, Gabrielle turned around and started walking fast toward the front of the house, like literally fleeing the scene. My dad reacted immediately, followed her, and I went after them. We caught up to her in the parking lot when she was trying to open her car, a BMW that she'd definitely paid for with my money, and my dad blocked her way. He said, "Gabrielle, look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. Did you do this? Did you steal your sister's identity?" And she stood there trembling, and finally, after months of lies and evasion, she admitted everything. She said yes, that she'd taken out the loans using my identity, that she'd forged the ID, that she'd used all the money for herself. She said she didn't think anyone would notice, that she planned to pay them back eventually, but that things had gotten out of control. My dad asked her, "How could you do this to your sister, to your family?" And Gabrielle just shrugged and said, "I don't know, Dad. I'm sorry." But she sounded more frustrated than remorseful. Like she was more bothered that she'd been caught than by the fact that she'd committed fraud. My dad turned to me and literally tears came out. He said, "Madison, forgive me. I should have believed you. I should have investigated before throwing you out of the house. I was an idiot and a bad father." And I was crying at that point too, because finally, after months of feeling completely alone and betrayed, my dad was on my side. I hugged him and told him, "It's okay, Dad, you didn't know. She fooled both of us." Though truthfully, it wasn't totally okay because it had hurt me so much that he didn't believe me. But in that moment, I just needed to get my father back. Gabrielle tried to leave, but my dad told her that if she tried to run, he would personally make sure the criminal charges proceeded with the full force of the law. He told her she had two options. Either she paid back every cent of the $65,000 plus interest and completely cleared my name and credit, or we were going to proceed with a criminal lawsuit that would probably end with her in jail. Christopher had explained to me that identity theft and fraud were serious crimes that could result in years in prison, so Gabrielle knew the threat was real. After like half an hour of tense negotiation there in the parking lot, with the whole family watching from the yard, Gabrielle finally agreed. She said she'd pay everything, that she'd contact the banks and clear my name, that she'd do whatever was necessary to fix the mess she'd caused. My dad told her we had to put it all in writing with a lawyer present, that he wasn't going to accept empty promises, and we organized a meeting with Christopher for the following week where Gabrielle signed a legal agreement committing to pay all the debt and to cooperate with all the credit disputes. The following months were a long and tedious process of fixing the whole mess. Gabrielle had to sell her car, had to move to a much cheaper apartment, had to get a second job to be able to pay the monthly installments we agreed on. She contacted each bank and formally admitted the fraud, which helped enormously with the process of cleaning up my credit. Christopher represented me in everything and made sure every step was documented, legally so Gabrielle couldn't back out. I'm not going to lie. There were moments when Gabrielle tried to play the victim. She'd call my dad crying, saying she couldn't pay, that it was too hard, that we were punishing her too harshly. But my dad was firm. He'd tell her that she'd made the decisions that put her in that situation and that she had to face the consequences. I never spoke directly with Gabrielle again after that day at the family reunion, and honestly, I have no interest in doing so. She stopped being my sister the moment she decided to steal my identity and ruin my life. About 3 weeks ago, Gabrielle made the last payment. After a year and a half of monthly payments, she finally paid off the $65,000, plus all the interest and charges that had accumulated. My credit was officially cleared, the black marks were removed, and all the banks sent me letters confirming that the debts had been settled and that my name was clean. Christopher called me with the good news, and I literally started crying in the middle of the clothing store. Amber had to cover for me so I could go to the bathroom to compose myself. My relationship with my dad has improved a lot, though there are still awkward moments. He still feels guilty for not believing me and throwing me out of the house, and I still have some resentment, though I'm working on forgiving him because in the end he was also a victim of Gabrielle's lies. I go visit him every 2 or 3 weeks now. We eat together, watch movies, try to rebuild what she destroyed. He asks me a lot about Gabrielle, if I've talked to her or if someday we could reconcile as sisters, and I tell him honestly, I don't know, Dad. What she did was unforgivable. I still work at the clothing store with Amber, who became my best friend through this whole horrible process. Without her, I don't know if I would have had the strength to investigate and confront Gabrielle. She literally saved me from continuing to be a victim of something that destroyed my life. I'm saving money now that my credit is clean, thinking about maybe moving to a better apartment or even going to college, things that seemed impossible a year ago when I was buried in debts I hadn't incurred. Gabrielle? I don't know much about her. I know from my dad that she's still working her 2 jobs, that she lives in a small apartment, that basically she's starting from scratch because she sold everything to be able to pay me back. Part of me feels sorry for her, but most of me thinks she completely deserves it for what she did. She stole my identity, destroyed my credit, ruined my relationship with my dad, made me lose my home, all to finance a lifestyle she couldn't afford. And the worst part of it all is that she did it without any remorse until I confronted her in front of the whole family, like I didn't matter. Like my life was something she could use and discard without consequences. Last week, I was organizing papers in my room and found an old photo of Gabrielle and me when we were like 8 years old, on our birthday, hugging and smiling. We looked identical even then. Same haircut, same clothes, same smile. I stared at that photo for a long while, thinking about how things change, how the person who was supposed to be my best friend for life ended up being my worst enemy. I put the photo in the back of a drawer because I don't want to throw it away, but I also don't want to see it every day. And I guess that pretty much sums up how I feel about all this. I can't erase that we were sisters, but I also can't pretend things can go back to how they were before. You know what I mean? Now, I'm focused on rebuilding my life and surrounding myself with people who really appreciate me and don't see me as a tool they can use. I have my job, I have Amber, I have my dad back, though the relationship still needs more healing, and I have my identity back, my name clean, my future open again, and that's going to have to be enough for now.